Hi guys, welcome to Mustache Plates, and in this video I'll be going through my shading process for this particular artwork. Now before I can go through my shading process, let me just say thank you very much for watching this channel and supporting it. Please continue supporting and subscribe if you like the video. And if you didn't know, I also have a Patreon going on. You can join the Patreon and get access to wallpapers, insights about current and upcoming projects, and also the complete blend files. So thank you very much. Now let's get started. Before I start, let me show you the complete node setup. In a first glance, it's a bit complicated, bit confusing with all the spaghetti going everywhere, but trust me, there is a process behind it and it will all make sense. For my shading process, usually I would like to have one base color that will take care of the highlights and the shadows, and after that I would like to have some kind of variation going on. For this particular artwork, I have three variations going on for the tower itself. One at the bottom, one in the middle, and at the top. For the main shader, I went with cell shader, that is your principal BSDF with shader to RGB and then the color ramp. This will allow me to select the color scheme or the main colors of the tower. I went with yellow and orangish, so the orangish for the shadows and then the yellow for the highlights. Through this I can control how much of the highlight I want and how much of the shadows I want. Once I'm done with my color scheme, I can use the gradient texture to create a fall off for the shadows. This way I can create a fall off for the areas that are further away from the light, and I can control how strong I want the fall off to be. With this, I'm done with my final coloring. Now I need to create a main variation. For my main variation for this particular artwork, I'm using a plaster image texture. All the textures that I'm using are from Polygon. This will allow me to create variation for some kind of wear and tear. So some areas will be normal and others will be slightly darker. And I'm going to use the main shader that we have just created and also the hue saturation node to create the two variations out of it. Once I'm done with this, I will also use the same image texture to create the normal map and the reflection map. And with this, we are done with our main shader. From now on, all I'm going to do is one by one go and look at what are the variations that I need for the top, bottom and middle, and then just keep repeating the same steps again and again. Find the image texture for the variation and then just use the same color and the hue saturation node just to create few different versions of that same color. That's it. So let me just show you all the variations that I've created on top of this. First I started with the bottom, then something for the middle, and finally for the top. And once I'm done with all of them, I also created one for the overall image, something for the whole tower itself. And as you can see, all of them actually using the same shader that we have created. They are just repeating the steps again and again. I just keep plugging the shader through another hue and saturation node and then keep creating more and more variations through it. So let me just go into detail all the variations that I've created. I wanted to create two bigger variations for bottom and top, and then one smaller variation in the middle, so just to separate them out. So let's just start with the bottom one first. For the bottom one, I went with the carpet texture. And since we are just creating a color variation, we can actually choose any kind of texture that we want. It doesn't really have to be building related textures, bricks and concretes, just all those. Anything that works is fine. So what I'm gonna do is use this image texture as my main source, and then I'm gonna use the gradient texture to decide where I want to put this texture on, the top or the bottom. And then I'm just gonna combine both of them to create the final mask for the color variation. Then same thing, I'm just gonna plug it into the color mix and then use the hue saturation to create the color differences for both of them. And I'm done with the first part. Now let's focus on the second part, the middle variation. The middle variation is actually quite simple. I just wanted it to have one clear strip of certain color. So I just used the gradient texture to create the mask out of it. And because I didn't really want it to be very clear line, I just used the noise texture to remove away some of the paths from it. And then just use the color mix to add whichever color I like. For this case, I just went with bluish color. Now let's go to the top part. For the top part, I decided to go with the cobblestone texture. So similar to the bottom variation, I took my image texture as the main source, and then I used the gradient texture to figure out where I want to place it, and then I combined both of them to create the mask for the variation. Then finally using the color mix to create the colors for the top part. Once I was done with all three variation, I also created one more for the overall structure, something like a old cracks going on throughout the whole building. For this I used the clear texture, running through the color ramp to create the mask, and then just plug it straight to the color mix. Usually we would use the normal maps to create this kind of cracks or any kind of wear and tear, but I prefer to do them using the texture mask itself or putting the color itself. You have more control over it like this, and also it shows up much nicer. Once I was done with all this, the rest is just repeating it for every single block of the tower. I also kept changing the colors or the texture itself, so it wouldn't really look repetitive throughout the whole process for every single block of the tower. Because the tower is shaped very identical, it is very easy to spot the repetition going on. So I just changed the texture for a few of the blocks here and there, and then it looked a bit different, and that did the job. And that was how I did the whole texturing for this particular project. I don't really have any kind of guide for how I select my textures. Most of the time it is just trial and error. I just go with a thought of how I want the overall look to be, and then I just try a few different textures and see which one really suits the best. As long as you have the color scheme going on, the colors are complementing each other, I think most of the time, regardless of what kind of textures you're using, you will be fine. So this is all from this particular video. This is how I did my texturing process. This is not always the same. I always keep changing around few things here and there depending on what kind of project I am doing. Even though it's all stylized, still there are a few different variations that you can do in the stylized realm itself. I hope this was helpful for you and you can use some of it in your own project. If not, I will be putting this whole project file in my Patreon. So if not, you can join it there, and you can get not just this but also some other blend files that I have already published it over there. So be sure to check that out, and if nothing else, please subscribe, and I will see you next time. Thank you. Bye bye.